Chapter 1. The Unholy Shriek. The first sign that something was wrong came when I heard an unholy shriek from my barn. It wasn't a normal shriek, the kind you hear from a startled person or even a furious neighbor. No, this was the kind of sound that could only come from someone experiencing a full-body disaster in real time. Before I could even process what was happening, there was a loud, panicked moo, followed by the unmistakable sound of something. No, someone hitting the dirt hard. I sprinted out the back door, my boots kicking up dust as I ran toward the chaos. What I saw next was so baffling that for a few long seconds, my brain refused to accept it as reality. Linda Henderson, my entitled neighbor, was sprawled out in the middle of my field, covered head to toe in mud and cow spit. Her ridiculous cowboy hat sat crooked on her head, and her face was frozen in a mix of shock and pure, unfiltered agony. But the most absurd part? My sweet old dairy cow, Bessie, stood a few feet away, staring down at her as if she had just personally avenged every farm animal that had ever been wronged in history. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, Linda tried to scramble to her feet and slipped, landing flat on her back again with a wet squelch. That's when I noticed my worst fear. In the far corner of the field, 3 kids stood with their phones out, cameras recording, wheezing with laughter. I had no idea how this started, but one thing was certain. This was going to be a disaster of biblical proportions. Chapter 2. The Wrath of the HOA. By the time Linda managed to crawl to her feet, she was shaking with rage. Mud dripped from her once pristine jeans, and her fancy boots, ones that had probably never seen a day of actual farm work, were caked in filth. Bessie let out another leisurely moo, flicking her tail like she was completely unbothered by the chaos she had caused. "This is outrageous," Linda shrieked, throwing her arms up. You let this beast assault me." I folded my arms, doing my best to keep a straight face. "Linda, what exactly were you doing in my pasture?" Her face twisted, a deep shade of red blooming across her cheeks. "I was investigating a violation," she spat. "Your property is disrupting the uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood." I blinked. "It's a farm, Linda. I own farmland. That's what farms look like." She gasped as if I had personally insulted her ancestors. "It is an eyesore. It is lowering property values, and I will not stand for it." She jabbed a mud-covered finger toward me. "I'll be filing an official HOA complaint. This whole disgusting mess will not stand." A loud snort came from behind me. I turned to see my neighbor, Hank, leaning against the fence, grinning ear to ear as he chewed on a piece of straw. "Now, Linda," he drawled, "I reckon you just got bested by a cow. Maybe you ought to rethink your strategy." Linda let out an inhuman screech, spun on her heel, and stormed off, leaving a trail of cow slop footprints behind her. "Well, this is gonna be fun," I muttered as I watched her stomp away. Chapter 3. The Letter Arrives. 2 days later, I woke up to an envelope taped to my front door. The HOA's gold embossed seal glared at me like a death sentence. Notice of violation. Dear Mr. Carter, it has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that your property is in direct violation of multiple community guidelines, including but not limited to. The presence of an unapproved livestock enclosure is visible from the street. The presence of excessive mud and debris within community sightlines. The unruly and aggressive behavior of your livestock toward a board member. Failure to rectify these issues within 14 days will result in fines and further action. Sincerely, Linda Henderson, HOA President. I stared at the letter, letting each absurd accusation sink in. Unruly and aggressive behavior? Bessie was eating grass when Linda flopped into the mud like a dying fish. And excessive mud? It had rained 2 days ago. What did they expect me to do? Vacuum the dirt? I exhaled through my nose. "All right, Linda, do you want a war? You just got one." Chapter 4. The Showdown. For the next week, I prepared for battle. I filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, arguing that my farm had been in compliance for years before the HOA started their nonsense. I also made sure to document every single ridiculous violation notice Linda and her cronies sent my way. Meanwhile, the community had started picking sides. Some of the longtime residents, folks who had been here long before the HOA took over, rallied behind me. Others, mostly the ones who bought into the HOA's vision of a pristine community, whispered about how I was ruining the neighborhood. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. They held it in the community clubhouse, and the place was packed. Linda stood at the front, flanked by her loyal board members, holding a stack of printed violation notices like they were evidence in a federal trial. I took my seat in the front row, arms crossed, waiting for the show to begin. Linda cleared her throat dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to address an ongoing nuisance, an eyesore that threatens our community's very integrity. There were a few murmurs of agreement, but more than a few eye rolls. Hank, who had come just for the entertainment, leaned over to me. I didn't realize farming was such a national crisis. Linda continued, her voice rising. Mr. Carter's property has repeatedly failed to meet the HOA's standards. He refuses to maintain a proper aesthetic. He allows dangerous animals to roam freely. Dangerous animals? I cut in, unable to hold back. Bessie's a cow, Linda. A cow. She literally chews grass all day. Someone in the audience chuckled. Linda glared at them before turning her gaze back to me. You think this is funny? You've left us no choice. The HOA has officially filed for legal action to have your livestock removed. The room erupted into arguments. Some people were outraged, others cheered. But before Linda could bask in her moment of glory, the doors swung open. A man in a county government suit strode in, holding a file in one hand and a very official-looking letter in the other. Chapter 5, The Unexpected Twist. Excuse me, he announced, his voice cutting through the noise. I'm here on behalf of the county zoning board. We received Mr. Carter's complaint, and after reviewing property records, we found something interesting. Linda's smug expression faltered. The man opened the file. This farm was established before Oakwood Heights became a residential neighborhood, which means, under grandfathering laws, Mr. Carter's land is exempt from any HOA restrictions. Dead silence. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That can't be right. The man gave her a polite but firm smile. It's very right. The HOA has no legal authority over his property, which means all violations, fines, and complaints against him are null and void. Hank let out a loud whistle. Well, ain't that something? Linda turned bright red. But the county official held up a hand. And one more thing. We also found several discrepancies in how HOA funds have been allocated. There will be a full audit conducted immediately. Linda paled. Her minions fidgeted uncomfortably. The tide had turned. Chapter 6, A Peaceful Victory. 2 weeks later, Linda resigned from her position as HOA president. Rumors swirled that she had misused HOA funds, and while no official charges were filed, she packed up and moved out of town not long after. The new HOA board, made up of more reasonable folks, formally apologized and wiped my record clean. They even sent a small gift basket, though I suspected it was more out of fear than goodwill. As for Bessie, she became something of a local celebrity. People still stopped by to take pictures with the cow that defeated the HOA. Hank even made a custom sign for my barn that reads, Bessie's territory, trespass at your own risk. And me? I got to keep my farm, my animals, and my peace. The HOA war was over, and I had won.